Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to Living the Gospel of Life. I'm your host, Leticia Velasquez, and as always, we will start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. O Mary, bright dawn of the new world, Mother of the living, to you do we entrust the cause of life. Look down, O Mother, upon the vast numbers of babies not allowed to be born, of the poor whose lives are made difficult, of men and women who are victims of brutal violence, of the elderly and sick killed by indifference or out of misguided mercy. Grant that all who believe in your Son may proclaim the gospel of life with honesty and love to the people of our time. Obtain for them the grace to accept that gospel as a gift ever new, the joy of celebrating it with gratitude throughout their lives, and the courage to bear witness to it resolutely, in order to build together with all people of goodwill the civilization of truth and love, to the praise and glory of God, the Creator and Lover of life. Amen. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I'm very honored to be sharing this hour with Dr. Chris Kahlenborn. Welcome, Dr. Kahlenborn.
Thank you very much.
Chris has done a lot of research into abortion is an effect on women and a possible link to cancer, and also the pill. And now we're working on Plan B. Please tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. Leticia, I'm a board-certified physician. My background is in internal medicine, and I really started researching the birth control pill about 20 years ago and noticed a link to breast cancer. So I give some talks. I've given some over the years in different countries, Russia, China, Canada, and I testified before the Food and Drug Administration. And in 2006, we published a paper in the Mayo Clinic showing that oral contraceptives markedly increase your risk of breast cancer. And over the last few years, I've kind of shifted over to Plan B, which is very controversial because it's given even in some of the Catholic hospitals. And there's no question that the medical literature in my mind now shows that it works by causing an early abortion at times. And we did publish a paper in the Linacre Quarterly, put out by the Catholic Medical Association in February 2015. And almost everything I talk about today can be found on our website, polycarp.org. That's polycarp.org.
Thank you for that. Could you describe what Plan B is for those that don't understand?
Sure. Plan B, Leticia, is basically just a hormone called levonorgestrel. It's a type of progestin. There's two female hormones. One are the progestins and one are the estrogens. And the progestin actually is just as potent, if not more, than the estrogen as far as causing breast cancer. But Plan B is just levonorgestrel. You usually take it 12 hours apart. It was legalized in 1999 by the Food and Drug Administration, and then in 2013, they had, I say they had the gall to make it over the counter. So really any woman at any age can take it, even like a 12-year-old.
Is it true? I think I saw a picture of a Plan B in a vending machine. Is that casually dispensed? Or is it without
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know that. I think I've seen those pictures. I think it's still usually given in pharmacies, but I mean, you can get it all over online without a prescription. So
they may have been trying to make a point with the picture, but and I think California was making sure that it was available to all college students, and it's very heavily marketed. So it's definitely very easy to get. I've seen it in my pharmacy for sure.
Wow. Yeah, it's unbelievable, what can I say except that there's a lot of misinformation that I hope to get into today.
So a 12-year-old girl could obtain Plan B?
Yes, and of course that kind of goes to the next question. What about women who have experiencing incest, or these are really kids? Now you can easily cover it up, and it's just outrageous. But anyway, that's where we are today.
That's right. And how effective is it supposed to be?
Well, that's one of the myths. It's claimed to be almost 89% effective, and you will see that on almost all the pro-Plan B websites or pro-abortion websites. But in reality, when we get into the studies, the more recent literature shows that it's probably only about 50% effective. And we'll talk about it later, but actually there are times when Plan B could actually make you get pregnant, might be causing you to become pregnant.
Well, that's horrifying. Women taking something to increase their chance of getting pregnant. So there's a major ethical question about how Plan B works. Some say it's contraceptive, and some say it works by causing an early abortion. I've heard Plan B stops both sperm flow and prevents women from ovulating. So how can it possibly cause an abortion?
Well, if those things were true, you would be right, and the people who make the assumption that Plan B stops ovulation or sperm flow continue often to say that that's how it works. But both of those have been proven false. In our Linacre Quarterly article, again found at polycarp.org, the paper's right up there, and there's a gentleman in Nacimiento, and in 2007 he showed that Plan B really has no effect on sperm migration or flow. So it's kind of a myth that it stops sperm flow. As far as ovulation, this has been promoted by many groups, and it continues to be promoted despite the evidence that you could actually see with the high-tech ultrasound. You can see ovulation occurring if you give Plan B prior to ovulation, so you can see it. So there's no real way to dispute that unless you want to deny all medical evidence.
Wow. So it doesn't stop sperm flow and it doesn't stop ovulation. So how does it work?
So the way it works most likely is that if you don't stop sperm flow and you don't stop ovulation, then, just putting those two together, you have to ask yourself, why aren't you getting pregnant? And the answer is, you really are getting pregnant, and you just don't know it because the baby dies very early in the pregnancy. So it's really causing early abortions if you give it prior to ovulation. We can't tell how often, but all the evidence seems to point in that direction.
And how would you determine if somebody were pregnant very early?
So that's a good...
Does it most pregnancy tests take 14 days, am I right?
Yeah, the normal pregnancy test is usually 12, 14, 16 days after fertilization. So that's quite a while. And there is, in the Chinese literature, and again, the citation can be found in our paper, that there's something called early pregnancy factor. And this is a very early test of pregnancy within 2 days of fertilization, within 48 hours. So you could really prove that these women are getting pregnant on Plan B, and that's how you could do it. It's possible.
So the only thing is that most women that are involved in this are in no shape to be taking part in clinical testing, for sure. So you have to go by the overall. How do you tell this if you can't do it in a lab?
What's that? How would you tell?
You can't. So you can't really tell if they were pregnant and the baby died before implantation, unless you do these kinds of tests in a laboratory. Correct?
That's correct.
There's no way to know when the baby dies, if there is a baby or not. If the baby is created and when the embryo would die.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, these are expensive tests. They were done in the 1980s with the intrauterine device, and what they found was when you have an intrauterine device, you don't really get visibly pregnant. But if you do the early pregnancy factor test, you find these women are getting pregnant all the time. They just keep losing the baby. It's a failure to implant, most likely. So that was done in 1982 by a researcher named Dr. Smart, and he found, the IUD, you can use this early pregnancy test to show IUDs were clear-cut abortifacients. And you could do the same thing with Plan B, but it would be expensive to do it.
Doesn't seem to be a whole lot of interest either. So how exactly does Plan B cause early abortion?
So a lot of people think that the way Plan B causes an abortion is that it affects the endometrium so that the little tiny embryo can't implant. And there's kind of mixed evidence for that. Probably the more likely effect is that what's called the early embryonic death effect. And that is when you give Plan B, it basically lowers a hormone called luteinizing hormone that's supposed to go up in the middle of your cycle. And when that happens, babies conceived in this environment seem to die about 3 days after fertilization. It's called the morula stage. And no one knows why it happens, but this is most likely what happens, that Plan B affects luteinizing hormone, and then when fertilization occurs, these babies probably die in the fallopian tubes and never even make it down to the endometrium.
Into the uterus. Wow. I'm just amazed. So, a lot of researchers do not know this.
I think what happens is that the more political researchers keep kind of throwing smoke screens in this area, and they pretend not to know. But they'll call it dysfunctional ovulation, and they basically make some arguments that you really can't get pregnant on Plan B. But going through our arguments, which is really not mine or anyone else's, they're in the literature, that sperm and egg are there, fertilization likely occurs, and when it occurs in the setting of Plan B, it looks like that the baby dies in the early stage, and this is pretty much supported by medical literature.
And another interesting thing is that ACOG, American College of Obstetric Gynecologists, obstetrician gynecologists, have changed the definition of the beginning of life. Could you go into that a little bit?
Sure. They really redefined, I say they redefined life. They say they redefined pregnancy, but it comes out to be very close to the same thing. So I have to find the year. I'm not sure the exact year that was. I think it was 1990s or something like that. But they basically said that pregnancy no longer starts at fertilization. Pregnancy starts at implantation. So in effect, what happens is if a woman comes in and says, "Hey, doc, is my intrauterine device, can that cause an abortion?" And the doctor, he or she, could say, "Oh, no. And then they don't say anything after that, because according to their definition, pregnancy starts at implantation. So they don't have to say it causes an abortion, whereas almost all biologists or even lay people know that life, that pregnancy begins at fertilization. So basically, by redefining pregnancy when it begins, they're try to redefine life. And then these top researchers, if you ask them Plan B, does it cause an abortion? They'll say, no, it could cause a loss of embryonic life, but that's not an abortion. So they're all mixed up in their head.
Wow, that's funny. How many days does that buy them from the actual conception in the fallopian tubes to implantation in order to redefine abortion? How many days does that usually take?
Most estimates that I've read is that the travel time from the beginning of the fallopian tube to the endometrium is about 5 to 7 days. That's not my that's not my area of expertise, but that's what I've read.
All right, so there's 7 days that they can play with the definition of what is a human life. Well, they play with it anyway, right? They say that the child can be killed at any time throughout pregnancy and even after pregnancy. So even birth is not a ticket to protection anymore.
That's right. in some of the liberal states, right?
Yeah, well, and one of which I live in Connecticut, which probably is very shortly to do that as well. So where have we done studies to understand how Plan B works?
Well, the studies have been done all over the world, but what's ironic is there's a pair of very famous researchers. I believe they're from Chile, Gabriela Noa and Croxetto are the two researchers, and they clearly show that Plan B does not stop ovulation. 80% of the time when you give it 1 to 5 days before you normally ovulate, they could see by ultrasound that you ovulated. So it's like, wow, 8 out of 10 times it's not stopping ovulation. So how can, people continue to claim this? So that's the biggest studies come from Noah and Croxetto from Chile, and they're very high-tech recent studies. And it's hard to get 200, 300, 400 women together to study, who have taken Plan B. So that's taken a lot of effort, and they published in 2011, and it's pretty clear, So I'm sometimes wonder, what are we waiting for here,
Well, there's probably a clear answer why people don't just admit it's taking human life. We have a lot of political factors and a lot of money to be lost, correct?
That's correct.
And it seems to drive medicine, at least when it comes to reproduction, politics, and money.
That's right. Those are the politics, money, and pride seem to prevent the truth from getting out. And what's amazing to me, Leticia, in this area is that the medical evidence is really kind of in. Even some of the groups are still saying, okay, we can see that Plan B stops ovulation, but you can't get pregnant when Plan B is given because it decreases what's called the luteinizing hormone, what I had alluded to before. Mm-hmm. And yet there are two studies. One is by Andrews in 2000, Human Reproduction, and that was an in vitro study that showed that as unethical as it is, when embryos were conceived in the petri dish with no luteinizing hormone, they were able to be fertilized, and as I said before, they only grow to about day 3, the morula stage, and it's been done in monkeys too, where monkeys are given Plan B, a cousin of Plan B. It suppresses luteinizing hormone, and they all get fertilized, or most of them do, and they die in the morula stage. So, people keep throwing in these arguments, and they're just, what's the right word? They're disingenuous. I mean, it's like, come on, the medical literature is very, very clear, and even the Catholic Medical Association, the largest group of physicians in the United States, Catholic physicians, said, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago, it's right on their website, it's their position paper that Plan B cannot be given ethically.
Wow. So why do many bishops permit its use if the information is so clear?
So this is an area of really big disappointment and controversy for me, and I'll be very honest. There's a group, National Catholic Bioethics Center, which currently is headed by Dr. John Haas, and they really give the Catholic bishops a lot of ammunition or guidelines on moral theology and bioethics. So, or at least bioethics, I know they do. And so the bishops really look to them for guidance. Unfortunately, this group, they're not doctors, which is no disrespect. They could know the literature as well as we do, but they keep claiming that Plan B stops ovulation. And I went down there about 2 years ago and gave a presentation to all of their group, basically, and showed the ultrasound pictures, and they still said that Plan B stops ovulation, which is is just incredible, considering that some of the pro-abortion researchers are openly admitting that it does not stop ovulation, and this group still hangs on to these old tenets, not supported by the literature, and it's just it's ludicrous,
That must be very frustrating. I see here that on November 29, 2016, a press release from Catholic Medical Association saying they do not recommend Plan B under any circumstances. So they were made that clear. It'll be 3 years pretty soon that they are not in favor. I remember when this controversy was boiling, and I didn't know which way to turn. I'm no bioethicist or doctor, but I try and stay up on all the moral issues of our time, and that just really Catholics were really confused about that. And I'm sorry that some of the right seem to be at loggerheads with this.
Absolutely, and one of the biggest problem was that the first bishop to allow this, as far as I know, is Bishop Myers. I'm not even sure if he's still alive, but he was in Peoria. I think that's Illinois. Yeah, thank you. And he basically, I think he leaned on his moral theologians, and they made the assumption, which is a very bad thing to do, that they assumed or were told that Plan B stops ovulation if you give it before ovulation. And that's totally false. And so that's resulted in what's called the Peoria Protocol, which basically says that you are allowed to give emergency contraception such as Plan B prior to ovulation, as long as basically you think it's going to be stopping ovulation. And unfortunately, that premise is 100% faulty, or I should say 80%, because 80% of the time you still ovulate. And I think that was 1995. I'm not sure the exact year, but it was many years ago that they came out with this Peoria Protocol. And the bishops still cling to this, and it's so outdated. It's almost like gravity. I mean, you can see these ultrasound, you see the babies, and it's almost like a tennis ball falling. You can see it. So to deny it is just it's beyond absurd. So the bishops, I wish I could say that they didn't know the information. Unfortunately, we sent a copy of our Lineker paper to every bishop. Every diocese, in the United States, and that was about, I think, at least 2 years ago. So I can't tell you how frustrating it is. I mean, we're going through in the church one of the biggest scandals, and I would say this is the second biggest scandal, because here we're giving an abortion pill, and many of the Catholic hospitals, I would say most of them, offered Plan B or something similar to women who have been raped, and it's like, wow, you're not telling them that it can cause an abortion.
No, in my work in pregnancy centers, I find women are really woefully unable on what any of their contraception can do to their health, to their potential children. I had a woman come in a crisis pregnancy with an IUD in place. I've had, many women who have been on the Depo-Provera or Norplant and have been pregnant as well, because they weren't warned that these methods wane, their effectiveness wanes at the end of their 3 months or whatever their usefulness is. And they're woefully inadequate. They don't understand that they could be aborting. Really, a lot of people don't, because I remember when this whole controversy came out with the HHS mandate, where the religious orders, such as the Little Sisters of the Poor, were forced to pay for contraception. I think that's when our Protestant brothers and sisters started to understand that even though the pill is touted to be contraception, it can also act as an abortion. Many other contraceptives can actually. So I think that's when awareness started to grow in the general community that abortions aren't only surgical. That at least 40% of abortions in my home state are medical. They're usually RU486, but I imagine there's a number of Plan B abortions that we have no idea. We never will.
Yeah, we could find out if someone does the study, but my guess is that women who take Plan B if they're taking it before they ovulate, that if they were to have become pregnant, then it's really stopping the pregnancy by aborting it. So I think Plan B works a lot of the time, not by stopping fertilization, but by stopping ending pregnancy. So it's as you said, a lot of these different methods are not known to the public, and that's purposeful. I mean, even in the medical community, I know a lot of doctors who take the birth control pill. I know some who have gotten breast cancer from it. And as I alluded, it's just the birth control pill increases your risk of breast cancer. 21 out of 23 studies show that in the Mayo Clinic article in 2006. So one of the other concerns is people have asked me, can Plan B cause breast cancer? And the answer to that is it's possible that it could, because Plan B has the hormone levonorgestrel, the progestin in it, and one set, that is 2 pills of Plan B, can equal the amount of progestin as 2 weeks of birth control pills. So if women, they're getting a lot of this hormone, a lot of this levonorgestrel, and people, estrogen is a little bit political. People keep pushing that estrogen is the culprit for breast cancer, but I think it's actually more progestin. And so if you took Plan B, maybe every year for 14, 15 years, that would be the equivalent of about 6 months of birth control pills as far as the progestin content. So, our study, it could increase your risk of breast cancer, but, nobody studied it.
Well, these so-called women's advocates aren't interested. Well, I know why estrogen could be politically, why it could be controversial, because estrogen is given as a supplement to menopausal women, where progesterone is only given in terms of birth control, isn't it? Or abortion?
You can supplement women with progestin after menopause also, but most women take just the estrogen, which is far safer. And again, when you add a progestin, that's when you get the increased risk in breast cancer postmenopausally. That's what happened years ago. People looked at it and said, wow, when we add the progestin, the risk of breast cancer goes way up. So it only makes sense. For example, if you give the people who take Depo-Provera, if you take that for 2 years, that's 8 shots, one every 3 months, your risk of breast cancer goes up about 190%. So it's the progestins are very dangerous, and they also increase cervical cancer. But so there's no reason, going back to Plan B, that it couldn't cause breast cancer if it's used kind of overused.
Oh, and yet no one's talking about it. They managed to suppress that information, and that's really It's really tragic. We say that we're looking for the causes of breast cancer, but we're ignoring the most important causes. Didn't the UN say that it was a class 1 carcinogen, the pill, at one point? Am I wrong?
Yes.
The World Health Organization?
No, I think they call it's called a group 1 carcinogen. But you may be right. But yes, they definitely classify it as the most dangerous type. And again, most of my medical colleagues have no idea about this information. And most doctors, especially OBGYNs, I've found in the past that it seems like because they have the power to prescribe it, that somehow that power makes it a safe medicine. And,
if only.
I know, it's just incredible. So I've seen women with blood clots and other side effects, but the breast cancer, I mean, I just know a young woman, she's in her 40s, has a couple of kids, and just got breast cancer and was taking the pill for, I think, 20 years. And again, Plan B can do the same thing if you take it over and over. So this information's not getting out.
Do you have any data on how many times an average woman would take Plan B? Is it very common?
I don't
people
know
use
that.
it as a default birth control. That's what I meant, not just in the rare case of rape.
I don't remember. I read something. There are some category of women who tend to do that, but it's probably a small percent. I think a lot of them just rely on other methods like the birth control pill. But those who do use, the morning after pill or Plan B, they put themselves not only at risk of having an early abortion, possible breast cancer, but what I was alluding to earlier is that if you take Plan B on the day of ovulation or after, you could be increasing your risk of getting pregnant. And
that's awful. It's lying to women, really.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like a sad comedy. Women come to, for example, a Catholic emergency room. They're told that Plan B stops ovulation, which it doesn't. So if they get it early in their cycle, they're likely undergoing an abortion, very high possibility. Or if they get it in the middle of their cycle, because you can't tell where a patient is ovulating or not unless you do fancy hormone tests, and most emergency rooms don't do that.
And who does that in an ER, right? Who does that in an emergency room?
Nobody does that. No. It's expensive and cumbersome, and nobody, a lot of doctors, 1% maybe care about this issue, or I shouldn't judge, but it seems like nobody really gives it much moral thought. So, if a woman comes in on the day of ovulation into a Catholic hospital and gets Plan B, she's actually could be more likely to get pregnant. And there are researchers. One is named James Trussell. He's quite a fanatic advocate at Princeton for Plan B. And I'll just read you a little quote. In 2006, Dr. Trussell and another doctor named Davidoff wrote, "It even raises the counterintuitive but undocumented possibility that Plan B used after ovulation might actually prevent the loss of at least some of the 40% of fertilized ova that ordinarily fail spontaneously to implant or to survive after implantation," which is code language for it's more likely to get you pregnant. So because when they do the studies on Plan B, they basically will tell you that Plan B, if it's taken on the day of ovulation or after, has no real effect. But what they're missing from that equation is women who take Plan B usually have very low sperm flow. That is, they take Plan B because they might have been sexually assaulted, someone might have been used a condom, or some other method where the sperm count is very low. Now, if you would adjust for that sperm count, you would then likely find that Plan B doesn't have, quote, no effect. It has a positive effect in the sense of more likely to make you pregnant. So the whole thing's a joke. I mean, you come in, you're taking a pill that could be an abortion pill, or it could be more likely to make you pregnant. And even on the secular side, nobody hears a darn thing about it.
That is really frightening. Let me summarize and see if I'm understanding you correctly for my audience. Our Food and Drug Administration legalized Plan B, which contains the hormone levonorgestrel. How you say that? Levonorgestrel?
Levonorgestrel. Uh-huh.
Yeah, and can be purchased by a woman at any age in the United States since 2013. Now you've told us that the most current research is showing that if a woman takes Plan B prior to ovulation, there's a strong possibility of it working by taking human life at its earliest stage, that is, a baby. And if she takes it on the day of ovulation or after, it may increase her risk of pregnancy. Is this true?
That is, everything you said is right on.
Wow. Anything else? The breast cancer.
The only thing I alluded to the breast cancer portion, and I guess one of my frustrations is, there's two levels of this. One is for those who are Catholic in the audience within the church, that the church has to get it right on this issue. I mean, it already kind of blew it on the sex scandal and starting to recover slowly, but here it is again, where you have clear evidence that the pill is an abortion pill. And let me just be honest, nothing's being done. It's just being stonewalled, and this is the same pattern we saw before, and I know I'm being critical, but I think I have a right to be critical that this is, it's almost like, wow, does this cycle have to restart again where you get public pressure and lawsuits and other things for the bishops to actually take a courageous stand? I mean, how long do we have to wait once the medical evidence is in? And, if it were just me speaking, I could understand that. But the medical evidence is there, and the Catholic Medical Association has cited that evidence. And it's just, it's like a political game. It's almost pretending that you don't want to hear this information. And I cannot believe that all of the bishops are totally ignorant. Either there's a problem there that these are smart men, well educated, or whatever it is, they're not making the right decision on this. And I'm just urging them to review it and quickly take the same stance as the Catholic Medical Association and look at our video on polycarp.org. It's pretty clear, I think. It's not my research, it's other people's research.
Well, the one difference between this and the sex scandal, of course, is that the secular media cares about the sex scandal. I don't know if they care about the victims so much as they want to get the church, but you are certainly not going to have, and the attorney generals and the law enforcement and the media, secular media, are definitely interested in dirt about the sex scandal. They could care less if we're misinterpreting the data on Plan B. That is something they've been trying to suppress, as we said, with the birth control pill, with different methods of injectable birth control. They're not interested. They've been interested in keeping the truth from women on what's being done to their bodies with the hormonal contraception. So if anything, if the bishops are mistaken in this, and it seems that they are, the media is going to help them cover that up for sure.
That could be true. I guess this area for me, Leticia, is really just basically a matter of faith, in that I don't know why it's got to be this complicated, but it's almost that simple saying, what would Jesus do? I mean, if there's medical evidence that shows that a pill causes abortions, and you're the bishops, and maybe you don't want to get into this area because, the first thing they're going to hear is the bishops don't care about women who are raped, et cetera, et cetera.
Perhaps.
But, yeah, so that's to be expected. That comes with the territory. But as a matter of faith, you just perform the simple action of just doing what's right, and let Satan attack you, let it come where it is. But then you kind of got it at your sails. Then you can move forward. Where we are now is kind of this in-between stand between the world and faith. And are you going to take a strong stand? And I pray for them, but I'm frustrated, very frustrated.
Well, you mentioned that it might be comforting to say we've got an answer for that tricky question when you're a pro-lifer. What about in cases of rape? So when you're able to say, just take this pill and you won't get pregnant, it seems like an easy answer. I'll give you an example. I was recently at a pro-life lobbying day in my state capital in Connecticut, and I was meeting with the representative, the assistant of a representative that was pro-abortion, and reliably so in a very blue state. And he mentioned, well, what about rape? He went through all the typical, hard issues. And it was very hard for me to say to him, and though true, that I've talked to both women that were products of rape and are glad they're alive, and women who have been victims of rape, and were glad, number one, glad that they had the baby, they said it was healing, or they felt violated by an abortion. Because these are all difficult situations, and it involves his believing what I say is true, that these testimonies I've heard is true, because they're not widely spoken of in the media. It would be very easy for me to say, we just have this pill, and then you don't have to have an abortion. It makes it easier. It makes it nice and neat. You can put it in this category. The Catholic Church have checked that difficult issue off the list. Because to say that to carry a child which is a result of rape is the right thing to do is very hard for the world to accept. And it makes you look like you have no compassion in their eyes. That's how they see it in most cases. You're being unreasonable. You can't point out, oh, well, that's only 1% to 2%. You can't say that women have said it's healing. They don't believe it. And but saying, oh, yes, we've got this pill, it's a lot easier. And as you said, it seems more compassionate. But, you know, as we know in our relationship with the Lord, that he puts us through trials a lot to make us grow closer to him and grow in faith. And these are the things in our lives that we look back on and say, I'm a much better person. I always say that with my daughter with Down syndrome. I'm not going to tell you she's an angel. All right? She makes my life very interesting in many different ways and joyful in others. But there's trials and there's temptations and there's causes to grow. She's purifying me. Everything in our life, in the Christian life, is meant to bring us closer to God. And these circumstances, when we're pregnant against our will, is horrible. It's a crime to you, but it can also be a means of grace. God can bring good out of absolutely anything, but it requires a bit of faith. And if we're talking to people of no faith, it sets us up to be called all kinds of names, and nobody likes it. I didn't enjoy that discussion with that pro-abortion representative's assistant. Nobody likes that, and that's why so few people do. Look what happened to our Lord. I mean, he told uncomfortable truths to people in power, and he was crucified for it. And what did he promise us? More of the same, didn't he? So, Chris, Dr. Kahlenborn, looks like you're going through a little bit of that too, and it's the hardest when it's at the hands of those who share your faith and who are in charge of the church. It hurts the most.
Well, it has hurt, especially when the information has been presented, and I have spoken or written to several bishops, and I keep getting the same let me just be honest, it's just a phony excuse. They keep saying we need more studies, we have to talk to Dr. John Haas. I'm like, wow, since when is medical, since when is the decision delayed for years? Because we need more and more studies after the studies have been in. And in addition, one of the things that makes this almost so bizarre is that, Plan B is over the counter, so Catholic emergency rooms do not have to fill it. People can go to any pharmacy and get it. They don't have to come to the emergency room for that. In addition, one of the arguments that the Catholic bishops and others could make again is, wait a minute, people in secular emergency rooms are giving Plan B to women who maybe on the day of ovulation actually maybe making them pregnant. So who are you to tell us we can't have a medical ethical stance when you're giving a pill that could actually increase your risk of getting pregnant and not telling women.
Wow.
So there's plenty of approaches. Yeah, I just think that it all comes down, like you said, to either you go with God and you take the blows as you go, or you try to finesse it politically, which is what does not work.
Well, that's what led to the sex scandal, is going along with the culture, according to Pope Emeritus Benedict, right?
Right.
His letter about the sex scandal, he said it followed, and it's very clear, the trajectory of the sex scandal followed the sexual revolution. So did all these problems with contraception. Pope Paul VI, with Humanae Vitae, was right at the height of the sexual revolution when it really started picking up speed with Humanae Vitae. And how many Catholics listened? What percentage of Catholics are actually obeying that the teaching of the Church? So
not many.
No, and we're reaping the whirlwind of it. We don't care. We want to do what we want to do. We want to do what our heart tells us and not listen to the Church. And we end up with these terrible dilemmas that we're in. Not to mention the whole IVF situation, which is out of control. And my daughter's kindergarten teacher was a surrogate mother for money. I thought, lovely, this woman has such a big family. No, none of them were her children. It comes in.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know, it just bothered me, when she just told me with a big smile that she's doing it for money. And I was just like, whoa, you just don't expect it. And our children are being denied parents now, and and it's just frightening. Some of them may never know who their parents are because it's just too complicated.
I know. It's very, as you say, there's a lot of people, and I find a lot of people they seem like really nice people, and they're just misdirected. A lot of the Catholics participate in vitro without blinking the eye, and part of me is like, well, what do you expect? They've never heard it. Nobody preaches it unless maybe you listen to EWTN or a radio show like this. So
you have to actively seek out the truth, and most of us can't be bothered.
Yeah. So but one of the things about all this that maybe we haven't spoken about, but all this really comes down to love, and so. One of the things that is a mystery to me is, what about the love of God, the love of the truth, and because it's so beautiful that God has put all these beautiful guidelines down for us to follow, and they all lead to Him, and we just have to kind of stay on the road. But it's like, wow, what happened to the beautiful love of the truth, that no matter what happens, you choose the truth. And when it's awkward, like this Plan B and rape, of course it's awkward. And as you said, you're going to be persecuted. But maybe praying for the Holy Spirit to just cause us to love the truth so much that we can move beyond, the attacks and the awkwardness. And isn't that a beautiful thing, to just love the truth? Because doesn't that lead to loving others,
Yeah, well, you see it in a lot of young couples, at least in my church. I deliberately chose a church that's more traditional, and a priest that preaches very much in line with the magisterium. And you see these beautiful young families with many children, and you see the beauty of love actually lived out. And the gospel of life fully lived out. And there's a lot of sacrifice. I mean, you see those same outfits being used over and over again on the kids. No one looks like they've just stepped out of a department store, but so what? They're growing up with the blessing of so many siblings. I remember as an English as a second language teacher, I would meet immigrants mostly from Latin America. And the second lesson was always about family. My mother, my father taught them the names of the family tree, so they'd write out a family tree. And they need extra paper. Because their family tree was so big, they had 7 siblings, and they would always be embarrassed. And these are people who just came to this country from largely Catholic countries, that many of which, at least at that point, were not abortion wasn't legal. And I said, what are you embarrassed about? Well, I'm only going to have 2 kids, I promise. And I looked at them and I said, well, let me ask you something. When you came to this country, whose house did you live in? My brother's. Who got you your first job? My sister. Who takes care of your kids? My brother's sister. All right, so where and who do you meet with on Christmas and have all those huge parties with all the great, all my siblings? So all these siblings on the sheet are a blessing to you. Now, growing up in your country, I'm sure there were times that you wished that you didn't have to share food with so many people, or bed or clothing or whatever. I'm sure there's times that you got on each other's nerves. But who stands by you, and who takes care of your mother and your father? Oh, we do, of course. And she's got all these brothers and sisters, her children, to take care of her. So I try to bring the blessing of their family back to them, because apparently Planned Parenthood got into their mentality, even in Latin America. Thank you, United Nations Population Fund. Thank you, Planned Parenthood International, many of which funded by the United States, to get into these people's mentality and inject the contraceptive mentality that love isn't important, being politically correct, and having more stuff is. Well, how is that working out for the United States? We've got these terrible suicide rates, family breakup rates, depression off the charts. So many people are medicating just to get through life, because they bought the lie that small family size equals success, equals more stuff, equals greater happiness. And all the problem, as Dr. Janet Smith loves to point out, that contraceptive logically would have improved better marriages, right? More wanted children, more money. And everybody knows money means happiness, and less child abuse, and et cetera, et cetera. So none of it has come true. In fact, quite the opposite. Everything is going in a worse direction, and children are really, really confused. So confused that some of them even they think they're a different sex. And if the parents don't agree, the parents are put in jail. That really terrifies me. You know, what if a 5-year-old makes an odd comment, I want to be a boy, and all of a sudden that's law. You know, meanwhile, that 5-year-old, you wouldn't trust not to brush his teeth at night, you know. So, but the same child can make a life decision that would physically alter him forever.
Yes, and
so when you leave the tenets of God behind, when you leave the family, you end up with chaos.
Right, exactly right, and you know, I feel that one of the problems, as you mentioned, is you know, we have basically all these laws in the United States to the point of, and I can understand the bishops where they're afraid of getting lawsuits if they don't give Plan B or something like that. But if you just go back, wait a minute, you know, you basically were afraid to confront the sex scandal and covered it up, and look what you got, lawsuits. So the things that you're afraid, you know, so it's almost like God saying, if you're afraid of that, here's what you're going to get if you don't do it, you know. So
pay now or pay later. If you don't pay now, there'll be a lot more to pay later.
Yeah, and just what can you say? So we do our thing, you know, at our institute, this Polycarp Research Institute. We basically try to get the teachings out on some of these controversial areas that some people kind of wonder, why are you even studying that? You know, and again, it's just the love of the truth. You know, shouldn't women know that when they take the pill, they're increasing their risk of breast cancer? Shouldn't women who go to a Catholic emergency room know, and bishops know, and priests, that the pill you're going to get could end a life, and that it, you know, shouldn't that be openly debated and discussed? So all these things that, you know, I think need to get out there.
Well, I think, you know, the internet, which can be a curse, is also a great blessing in that respect. And if people go to polycarp.org, they can inform themselves, like we are doing in many other areas. I remember when my daughter with Down syndrome was born in 2002. Basically, the only thing you could find about Down syndrome online was how to find out your baby has Down syndrome and abort them. So needless to say that parents, especially parents of children with Down syndrome, have changed that in the past 17 years for the better. So there's lots of support out there for women who can't find support, and lots of information, and also lots of medical research. So the first step is informing yourself and finding out what's going on, and then to advocate for the truth, and that the truth be spread around. And well, that's what I'm helping you do today, and that's what I hope our listeners inform themselves further about the risks of Plan B and what it purports to do and what it really does, and that eventually truth, St. Augustine said, truth is like a lion. You let it free and it will defend itself. We're just letting it free right now.
That's nice.
Letting
I like
it
that.
out of its cage. Yeah, well, I didn't write that. I get my best quotes from saints. Let it out of its cage and let the public know the truth. And I think people are getting more prone to question authority that they used to rely on. Like you said, doctors saying, well, if I can prescribe it, it must be safe. I know parents are questioning the efficacy and safety of vaccines, and that's something we never questioned when I was growing up. And they're starting to take it to task. And in Connecticut, we have an exemption for vaccines, and it's being questioned. And there were a lot of homeschool, very crunchy moms with their babies in slings and feeding them nice, healthy food at the Capitol, saying, "Oh no, I've read this article," and they're all talking about medical journals. So it's a positive view that people are starting to make that question. Whether that applies to areas of sexual reproductive issues is another question, because as we've pointed out, there's a lot of deliberate misinformation out there about that for reasons of profit, pride, and what was the other one? Profit, pride, and politics, right?
You
can make the 3 Ps, right? Profit, pride, and politics. When there's money to be made, when there's somebody's reputation to be saved, and when there are votes to get, all truth goes out the window. But we can still hope that there are enough people with a conscience, people that care about whether an embryonic life is worth saving and care about that. I remember being horrified when I found out the pill was an abortifacient. And let me tell you an interesting aside. when my babies were very young, I didn't get to do a lot of pro-life work. I would hold up signs and whatnot at different events, but I didn't get out much. So I went to the library one night. There was an information center session about the pill and breastfeeding. And a nurse was there to basically sell the pill, and there was a young mother with an infant boy in her arms. And I just started asking the nurse questions. It was just the three of us. Are there any studies on the effects of female hormones of the pill on a male baby who's breastfeeding? And she said, no. And the mother said, ooh. And then I said, how does the pill work? And she went on to say that it prevents fertilization. I said, yeah, read the pamphlet you have in that package there. And she read about the endometrial effect of the pill and was shocked. The nurse who was selling the pill.
Wow. Oh.
And then the mother turned to me and said, I think I'm going back to NFP. All I had to do, and I'm not a medical person at all I had to see is read the pamphlet. Read the pamphlet.
Right.
They had to divulge that legally. But nobody, like you said, nobody reads the pamphlets. Nobody really wants to know. And so that's all it took is, again, let the truth out of its cage.
Yeah, and one of the things, you brought up a good point there, and that's a little bit, I want to bring up something that's closely related, that a lot of women take the pill. I think it's 10 million women a year, but I could be wrong. It's around that figure, I think. So one of the other problems with the pill is it fails. It fails quite often, and even if that failure rate is 3 to 5%, which is probably accurate, and a lot of people forget to take their pill. Well, what happens when you conceive, when you're taking the birth control pill? Now your baby is getting fertilized in a hormonal milieu that's high progestin, high estrogen. And what you were just saying about breastfeeding, it's like, what about 9 months earlier when you were conceived? Anybody who's conceived in these very high hormonal conditions, do we know what that's going to cause? Could that cause breast cancer in your baby or prostate cancer later on? And these are questions that... Or
gender confusion?
Exactly. I've never seen a study on any of this stuff. So,
no?
It's just one of the reasons when I was in medical school, I used to just go into the library and just dig around the old journals and just see what doctors said maybe 100 years ago. And there was some very interesting stuff. And, as you said, if you say the truth, it's like a line that will go out there. One of the things that we can do, anybody, is we have the internet. We can go to Polycarp and we can challenge our physicians and say, wait a minute, you say the pill is safe, but this article from the Mayo Clinic says 21 out of 23 studies show an increased risk in breast cancer. And it's good to challenge them. People are still intimidated by their doctors, and I'm surprised how few people will get a second opinion. They'll just go ahead with a huge surgery or something without really just kind of trusting the doc because he or she makes them feel good, and that doesn't cut it. When your doctor says the birth control pill or Plan B does not cause an abortion, you have the right to look things up, and challenge them. And they probably aren't going to be in denial, but you never know.
So you've heard it here, folks. A doctor saying that we should challenge doctors. All right? Not all of them believe that they're God. This is a doctor, Dr. Chris Kahlenborn, who believes that we should trust God, believe in God, and question our doctors, not question God and believe in our doctors. He's got his priorities straight. So go to polycarp.org. I've really enjoyed this discussion. Thank you for coming on Living the Gospel of Life, and I hope that many people who are watching or listening to this show will look up the information and inform themselves about Plan B and the contraceptive pill. Do you have information there as well?
Yes, we have Plan B, birth control pill. There are links to breast cancer, and we have a video on Plan B that's done within the last 6 months, and people might like that.
Very good. In case this was too much information, but at least we got the question raised, and people sort of questioning the faith and the doctrines of modern society, that the pill is the best thing that ever happened to women, that we don't know why breast cancer is skyrocketing, numbers are skyrocketing. Yes, we do have answers. We just choose not to listen to them. Thank you so much, Dr. Chris Kahlenborn. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us at Living the Gospel of Life. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.